Since it's been a while since I last talked about this show, mainly from last April of last year, I was originally going to do a revisit of Everyone Knows It's Bendy, but to tell you the truth, people really wanted me to review more episodes from this show, so it's honestly accurate and refreshing to review an episode called Emancipation, Complication, mainly the fact that I instantly forgot about this episode up until I rewatched it a few months ago. In fact, the more I remember this episode after rewatching it a few times, it reminds me of the Imposters episode, which is weird to think about considering that the main characters in this episode is a lot more in comparison to the other episode, while Frankie and Goofball are literally the main characters in all this. And while the other characters do contribute something at the very least, the amount of characters in this episode are mostly done correctly, well, aside from Blue. The premise is that Mac notices that a kid is using an imaginary friend to cheat, and his teacher threw the imaginary friend inside of a closet, which to his perspective, it isn't right, so he uses Blue in order to go inside the closet in order to rescue the imaginary friend. Except that he doesn't, so Mac does the deed. And the imaginary friend is Moose, but at the same time, the real imaginary friend who has the brains is a Penn who is Abraham Lincoln. And when they get back to Foster's, it's too crowded due to the fact that Foster's didn't have an adoption yet. As in a while, that the last time they had an adoption that put them in less stress by having the house to be packed with imaginary friends. Anyway, since that Madam Foster agrees to have Moose and Abraham Lincoln to stay, this gave Abraham Lincoln the advantage to tell Madam Foster to take a break and make him be in charge when it comes to the adoptions and whatnot. But it's revealed that Abraham Lincoln is a con artist with a fake accent that he's been using the entire time to avoid any suspicion. To tell you the truth, guys, what I really appreciate from this episode, aside from a few problems, is mainly the fact that I actually think that this is the type of episode that actually works for Foster's when it comes to an adoption situation. Every other facility when it comes to adoptions and whatnot, it's always packed when there hasn't been an adoption for about months or even years. Okay, granted, it's over-exaggerated, but at the same time, it gets bigger and bigger to the point that the problem that I have with this episode is that towards the end, despite the main characters winning, they never resolve on the whole Foster's being packed with so many imaginary friends. Granted, there are multiple reasons aside from the con artist using them for money, but at the same time, it really makes me question onto how Foster's is going to cooperate with more and more imaginary friends coming in, and they don't even have space to put them in rooms and only having them sleep in main hallways. But considering that the main antagonist, Abraham Lincoln, is a con artist that really made things a lot more worse for Foster's, to tell you the truth, even though that the mean-spirited nature goes a little too far towards the main characters at the very least, you can instantly tell that they actually made the antagonist done right when it comes to doing something vicious, because to tell you the truth, that's what con artists do. They whip people off and blame it on the other person while they bask in all the glory. If anyone's going to bring up that this is all Mac's fault for making things worse at Foster's, in all honesty, the fact that he wasn't being scolded at in comparison to Goo Goo Goo, well, he didn't mean to bring Goo into Foster's and it's mostly Blue's fault. In all honesty, the fact that the main characters were fully aware that it wasn't entirely Mac's fault, considering he's just trying to do a right thing for two imaginary friends. Believe me when I say this, if your teacher did something by taking things inside of the closet, even though that you disobey the rules, you would still want your things back, because I can guarantee you that even if they would still give you your equipment back at the very least in cartoon form, they wouldn't do that, like Max Teacher in this episode. And if anyone's going to bring up that Sally girl that she adopted Eduardo due to Abraham Lincoln's cult artist schemes, then to tell you the truth, if it bothers you, which for me it kinda does, but at the same time, it's literally one scene, and if Eduardo did scale her, I'm pretty sure it's mostly out of character, because to tell you the truth, Terrence actually deserves to get scaled by Eduardo from his and Eduardo's episode from season 3, and considering that this is mainly showcasing of what Abraham Lincoln is doing, his defeat towards the end by giving out the money that he scammed when it comes to using the imaginary friends is huge payback, especially since that Madame Foster punished the pen by biting and putting it in her nose and earplugs. Granted, what happens off screen is problematic, but unlike Across the Goes and My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, it's not like this is one of the worst things I've seen, because I've seen this episode for the first time when I was a kid, and I didn't mind any of it, unlike other episodes from this show. So let's get into another problem that I have with the episode, and that is Blue being addicted to a portable game that he found from the closet at school. To tell you the truth, I understand that the joke is that Blue doesn't pay attention to anything and he's only addicted to a portable game that he's been playing for all day, to the point that he desperately needs batteries and he uses his strength to find the batteries because that's all he needs and all he cares about is the portable game. Still doesn't excuse that the more you get older, at least from my perspective, it becomes less funny, and it just shows that Blue just isn't useful unless if it's for the convenience for the other characters, which for me personally I do not like. I was originally going to mention a YouTuber who made an analysis video centering around Blue's character, but this episode, when it comes to the context centering around Blue, it just isn't the right place and the right time to talk about it or mentioning it. The only thing I'm going to reconsider when it comes to that idea is if I review an episode from Foster as well, Blue is actually useful and likable. Honestly, for how Mr. Hellman is a lot more useful in this in comparison to the other episodes, really shows that when you make a character that people cannot stand a lot worse than Blue is really saying something. Even though that I'm fully aware that there was an episode that centers around Blue and Mr. Hellman from season 1, at the same time, it doesn't really make me think that Mr. Hellman is incapable of doing good deeds, because to tell you the truth, what he's doing in this episode by helping out really shows that they actually know how to handle his character a lot more than Blue when it comes to the context of this episode. Trust me, if you know who I'm referring to when it comes to the Blue analysis video, I agree with her opinions, but keep in mind, even though that she did mention this episode, I still didn't like Blue's betrayal in this episode, so only time will tell when I get to an episode where Blue is actually likable. But aside from the two problems, I found this episode really enjoyable when it comes to the execution, despite the problem that the characters didn't resolve on the whole house being packed with imaginary friends without any adoptions lately. Believe me, even though that some of you guys want me to review episodes that you requested, I honestly felt like that this episode alone was a lot more important because it made me remember it after coming back to it, considering that there are multiple episodes from this show that I get back to, but at the same time, I forget over time. But seriously, can you please stop requesting me to do more episode reviews from this, because I don't usually take requests that much, and I still haven't used Patreon that much, and the last time I used it was last year when I did a Bluey week of reviewing 5 Bluey episodes. Seriously, just because I don't have a job doesn't mean I'm incredibly greedy like Abraham Lincoln in this episode. I just want my Patreon to be put into good use after using it after 3 young Leos. At this point, it's becoming the same predicament as the main character's predicament in this episode when it comes to adoption problems with our houses being packed with imaginary friends, or rooms in this case. I'm giving this episode an 8.25 out of 10.